Los Angeles. The name itself is a promise, isn't it? A whisper of golden sun, sprawling boulevards, and dreams polished to a high shine. They call it the City of Angels. But if you listen closely, past the manufactured applause and the roar of the ocean, you can hear a different sound. A murmur of secrets buried under concrete, of hopes that curdled into desperation. Some places in this city have absorbed more of those secrets than others. They stand like silent, decaying monuments to the countless souls who came seeking heaven and found something else entirely. Tonight, we take you inside one such place. A once grand dame of a hotel that has become a mausoleum of broken dreams. A place where the check-in ledger reads like a list of the missing, and checkout is a courtesy rarely extended. We invite you to take the elevator to the top floor of a building where the ghosts are more real than the guests, and the glamour of Hollywood is just a peeling veneer over a heart of pure darkness. This is City of Angels, Hotel of Death. For those of you who find beauty in the darkness and truth in the shadows, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell. The stories we tell are the ones that the city itself tries to forget. Now, find a quiet room, turn down the lights, and listen. The concierge is waiting for you. The dust in Jake Riley's office wasn't just dust. It was a fine-grained sediment of failure. It was composed of particles from old case files, flakes of paint from the ceiling, and the microscopic, ground-down hopes of his clients. He sat with his feet up on his scarred oak desk, staring at the ceiling fan as it sliced lethargically through the thick, late-afternoon LA heat. The fan didn't cool the air. It just moved the apathy around. Outside his window, the iconic Hollywood sign was hazed over with smog, a cheap mirage promising a paradise that, from Jake's vantage point, looked a lot like purgatory. He had been LAPD once, a rising star in the homicide division, with a good partner and something that vaguely resembled a future. Then came the Starlight Slasher case, a phantom who had terrorized the city's aspiring starlets. One bad call, one missed clue, and a final victim that bled out in his arms had ended it all. His partner took a bullet that was meant for him, and the department, needing a scapegoat, had handed Jake his walking papers along with a lifetime supply of guilt. Now he was a private investigator, a bottom feeder in the city's food chain, taking the cases the cops wouldn't touch: the cheating husbands, the runaway teens, and the desperate families of the disappeared. The woman who walked into his office that afternoon was the latter. Her name was Sarah Monroe, and she had the wide, earnest eyes of someone who still believed in things. She was from Ohio, a place Jake imagined was green and full of uncomplicated problems. She clutched a worn photograph of her younger sister, Lily. In the photo, Lily was all sunshine and potential, with a wide, optimistic smile and the kind of blonde hair that the California sun loves to kiss. "She came out here 6 months ago," Sarah began, her voice steady but threaded with a tremor she couldn't hide. "Acting, the usual story. We talked every Sunday without fail. She missed her call 2 weeks ago, then a third. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Her landlord hasn't seen her. The police, they filed a report, but they said she's an adult. They said girls come here and get lost all the time." The casual cruelty of that phrase hung in the air. Getting lost in Los Angeles was a professional hazard. Jake had seen it 100 times. The city was a machine that chewed up starry-eyed dreamers and spat out husks. "What was she doing for work?" Jake asked, his voice a rusty baritone. "She was waitressing at a diner in Silver Lake," Sarah said. "But she'd just gotten a new job. A better one," she said. "Resident staff at a hotel downtown. The Seraphim Grand. She said it was a live-in position. Free room and board. It was perfect for her. A way to save money while she went to auditions. The Seraphim Grand." The name landed on Jake's desk like a tombstone. Every cop and private dick in the city knew the Seraphim. It was one of LA's original luxury hotels, a 12-story Art Deco masterpiece built in the 1920s to house movie stars and oil tycoons. But the decades had been unkind. The glamour had faded, the gold leaf had peeled, and the marble had cracked. Now, it was a residential hotel, a long-term home for the city's lost souls. Pensioners, transients, and those who had fallen so far they'd hit the very bottom of the social ladder. But it was more than just a flophouse. The Seraphim had a reputation. It was a place where people checked in and never checked out. A vertical graveyard with a disturbingly high number of suicides, unsolved murders, and inexplicable disappearances staining its long, dark history. It was a place the LAPD actively avoided. "I'll take the case," Jake said, ignoring the cold knot tightening in his stomach. He took Sarah's retainer, a crumpled handful of bills that was probably all she had, and promised he'd start at the hotel. An hour later, he was standing in front of it. The Seraphim Grand didn't just occupy a corner of a grimy downtown street. It consumed it. The once ornate facade was stained black with a century of exhaust fumes. Carved angels with chipped wings and sightless eyes stared down from the cornices, their expressions more like death masks than celestial guardians. The Grand Marquis, which once announced the visits of presidents and film legends, now had half its letters missing, spelling out a cryptic Sarah I. M. Rand. The lobby was a cathedral of decay. The vaulted ceiling was lost in shadow, the colossal chandeliers were dimmed to a funereal glow, and the air was thick with the smell of dust, cheap disinfectant, and a faint, sweet, underlying scent of rot. The once plush carpets were worn down to the threads, their intricate patterns blurred into a single muddy color. A few residents, gaunt and silent as ghosts, were scattered in the threadbare armchairs, staring at nothing. The man behind the front desk was named Hector. He was a small, weasel-faced man with slicked-back hair and eyes that darted around as if he were constantly expecting a blow. The name tag on his ill-fitting blazer was tarnished, just like the brass fixtures on his desk. "Riley, private investigator," Jake said, flashing a business card instead of a badge. He didn't have a badge anymore. "I'm looking for one of your resident staff, Lily Monroe." Hector's eyes flickered with something recognition. Fear. It was hard to tell. "Don't know the name," he lied, his gaze dropping to the blotter on his desk. Jake leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, Hector, a girl is missing. Her sister is worried sick. The last anyone heard, she was working here, living here. Let's not make this difficult." He let a $50 bill slide across the counter. Hector's fingers, quick and nimble, made the bill disappear. He sighed, a gust of stale coffee and cigarettes. "Room 914, he muttered, his eyes still avoiding Jake's. "But you won't find her there. Nobody's seen the girl in over a week. Her stuff's still up there, though. Management hasn't cleared it out yet." He slid a tarnished brass key across the counter. It wasn't a key card. The Seraphim was too old, too neglected for modern technology. The elevator was a gilded cage, rattling and groaning its way upward as if it were being dragged to the gallows. Jake stepped out onto the 9th floor. The hallway was a long, narrow tunnel of gloom, lit by buzzing, flickering sconces that cast long, dancing shadows. The wallpaper, a repeating pattern of faded cherubs, was peeling away from the walls in long strips, like sunburnt skin. The silence here was different from the lobby. It was a heavy, listening silence. Room 914 was at the very end of the hall. The key turned in the lock with a grating sound. The room was small, a box containing a single bed, a small desk, and a wardrobe. A single window looked out onto a grimy airshaft. The room was neat, but it felt abandoned. Lily's belongings were there. A handful of clothes in the wardrobe, a dog-eared copy of a Tennessee Williams play on the nightstand, and a scattering of headshots on the desk, all featuring that same brilliant, hopeful smile. It was the smile of a girl who had no idea what kind of place she had moved into. Jake began a methodical search. He was looking for a note, a diary, anything that might hint at where she'd gone. He found nothing in the main room. He moved to the small, attached bathroom. The air was colder in here, and the sweet, cloying smell of rot he'd noticed in the lobby was stronger. He checked the medicine cabinet. Nothing. He was about to leave when he noticed it. On the grimy, tiled wall behind the toilet, someone had scratched a symbol into the plaster. It was a circle with a single stylized wing extending from one side. It looked like a broken halo. A chill, unrelated to the room's temperature, crawled up his spine. It was a deliberate mark, a secret sign. He took a photo with his phone, his mind racing. Was it a gang sign? A religious symbol? He returned to the main room, his senses on high alert. The hotel was no longer just a decaying building. It was a crime scene. As he stood in the center of the room, he heard a sound from the hallway. Faint, rhythmic scraping. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. It was slow, heavy, coming closer. Jake drew the .38 he carried in a shoulder holster, the weight of it a familiar comfort. He moved to the door, pressing his ear against the cold wood. The scraping stopped directly outside his door. He held his breath, listening to the suffocating silence. He imagined someone standing out there, their hand raised to knock, their presence a palpable weight on the other side of the door. He waited for a full minute, his heart hammering against his ribs. Nothing. Finally, he wrenched the door open. The hallway was empty. There was no one there. But on the floor, directly in front of his doorway, was a single, fresh scratch mark in the dusty floorboards, as if something heavy, something made of metal, had been dragged to his door and then lifted away. The air in the hallway was thick with the scent of rust and decay. Jake stood there for a long moment, the silence of the 9th floor pressing in on him. He had been a cop for 15 years. He'd seen the worst the City of Angels had to offer. But he had never felt a sense of pure, architectural malevolence like the one that permeated the walls of the Seraphim Grand. This hotel wasn't just a witness to tragedy. It was a participant, and it knew he was here. Lily Monroe hadn't just gotten lost. She had been swallowed. The scraping sound and the empty hallway left Jake with a disquiet that clung to him like the city's smog. He left the Seraphim that night feeling as though he'd spent the day in a crypt, and that some of its chill had followed him out into the neon-lit streets. The broken halo symbol was a splinter in his mind. It was too deliberate to be random graffiti. It was a signature. His first call the next morning was to his old partner, Marcus Jonesy Jones. Jonesy had survived the shooting that had ended Jake's career, but he'd been left with a permanent limp and a desk job in the Records and Archives Division, a dusty purgatory for a cop who had once been a brilliant street detective. Their relationship was strained, a landscape of things left unsaid, but a bond forged in blood and bullets never truly breaks. Seraphim Grand? Jonasy's voice was a weary sigh over the phone. You're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, Riley. Why am I not surprised? Don't you know that place is a black hole? Cases go in, they don't come out. I'm looking for a symbol, Jake said, ignoring the jab. He described the broken halo, and any unsolved disappearances or homicides connected to the hotel in the last, say, 50 years. There was a long pause, followed by a dry chuckle. 50 years? Riley, you're asking for a library, not a file. That place has been a revolving door of misery since the Great Depression. I'll see what I can do, but don't expect a neat little package. The Seraphim's file is a goddamn mess. Most of it is probably misfiled under Acts of God or Urban Decay. While Jonesy waded through the bureaucratic mire, Jake decided to dig into the hotel's public history. This led him to Evelyn Reed, a woman who was less a historian and more an obsessive archivist of LA's forgotten and macabre past. She lived in a cramped bungalow in Echo Park, a house that smelled of old paper and cat dander. Every wall was lined with bookshelves groaning under the weight of crumbling leather-bound volumes and yellowed newspaper clippings. Evelyn was a woman in her late 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that peered at him over a pair of half-moon glasses. She knew of the Seraphim Grand. It was, she said, one of her favorite tragedies. Oh, the Seraphim, she mused, pulling a massive, leather-bound scrapbook from a shelf. Built by a silent film mogul, a man named Atticus Blackwood, in 1926. It was to be his monument, a palace for the new gods of the silver screen. But Blackwood was a man with appetites. He was a member of several esoteric societies, obsessed with the occult. He built secret passages, hidden rooms, even a soundproofed suite in the subbasement he called the Chamber of Ascension. She opened the scrapbook. The pages were filled with faded photographs and newspaper articles. There was the hotel in its heyday, a gleaming white palace. And then the stories of its decline. A starlet falling from a 12th-story window in the 30s. A mobster found dismembered in his suite in the 40s. A series of horrific, unsolved murders in the 60s that the press had dubbed the Seraphim Slaughters. "The hotel is a wound," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "A place where the veil between worlds is thin." Blackwood believed the hotel itself was a kind of spiritual engine, that the intense emotions of its guests, the triumphs, the despairs, the lusts could be harnessed. After he lost everything in the crash of 29, he hung himself from the chandelier in the grand ballroom. His death was the first, but it consecrated the place. It set the tone for the century to come. Jake listened, separating the historical fact from the woman's Gothic flair. "Have you ever seen this symbol?" he asked, showing her the photo of the broken halo. Evelyn's eyes widened. She leaned closer, her breath smelling of peppermint. "Mercy." Yes. This was Blackwood's personal mark. His society, they called themselves the Children of the Penumbra, believed that man could achieve a kind of fallen divinity. Not true angels, but something other, exalted by worldly experience, by pain. The broken halo symbolized a mortal who had shed the pretense of purity to become something more powerful. Blackwood used to have it carved into the woodwork, inlaid in the marble. After his death, the new owners tried to remove it all, but they say you can still find it in the hotel's forgotten corners. A cult symbol, a missing girl, a hotel built by a madman. The pieces were coming together, but the picture they were forming was dark and twisted. His phone buzzed. It was Jonesy. "You're not gonna like this, Riley. I cross-referenced your symbol with the Seraphim's case files." Pops up. "A lot. It was found at the scene of at least 4 of the unsolved Seraphim slaughters in the 60s. And it gets weirder. I ran a search for any residents who might have a connection to Blackwood. There's a man living there now. Has been for 30 years. A long-term resident on the 9th floor. His name is Silas Croft. His grandfather was the head of maintenance at the Seraphim back in the 1920s. He worked directly for Atticus Blackwood. The 9th floor, the same floor as Lily's room. Jake felt a jolt of adrenaline. This was it. This was his first solid lead. He was back at the Seraphim within the hour. The lobby was as dreary as ever, the residence still a collection of human statues. Hector was at the desk, looking even more nervous than the day before. Jake bypassed him and took the rattling elevator straight to the 9th floor. Silas Croft's room, 902, was near the elevator. Jake knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. He could hear a faint, shuffling sound from within, then silence. He tried the handle. Locked. He was about to go back down and force the key from Hector when he heard a noise from the far end of the hall, near Lily's room. A soft, metallic click. His instinct screaming, Jake drew his weapon and moved silently down the hallway. The door to room 914, Lily's room, was slightly ajar. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was different. The neatness was gone. The headshots were torn to pieces. The mattress was slashed. The clothes from the wardrobe were strewn across the floor. It had been ransacked. In the center of the room, lying on the floor, was a single dead raven. Its black wings spread as if in flight. And pinned beneath its beak was a small Polaroid photograph. Jake's blood ran cold as he picked it up. The photo was of Lily Monroe. She was alive, but her eyes were wide with terror. She was tied to a chair, and behind her on the wall was the familiar, chilling symbol of the broken halo. The photo was new. The killer was still here in the hotel. He was taunting him. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent hallway. The old lock clicked into place, trapping him inside. The room was plunged into near-total darkness as the power to the single light fixture was cut. Jake spun around, his gun pointed at the door, his heart hammering. He heard a low, scraping sound from outside, the same sound he'd heard the day before. Then, a voice, low and distorted, as if spoken through a pipe, came from the other side of the door. You seek the fallen angels, detective, but you are in the heart of the abyss. The seraphim keeps what it is given. She is becoming a masterpiece, a monument to the city's beautiful decay. And soon you will join her. The voice was followed by a low, rattling laugh that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Jake threw his shoulder against the door, but it wouldn't budge. He fired a shot at the lock, the explosion deafening in the small room. The old wood splintered, and he was able to kick it open, stumbling out into the dimly lit hallway. The hallway was empty. The scraping sound was gone. But Jake knew he was no longer just an investigator. He was a character in the hotel's sick, ongoing play. The killer wasn't just a person. He was an extension of the hotel's will, a high priest in this cathedral of despair. And he was watching Jake's every move, turning the investigation into a deadly, personalized trap. The hunt for Lily Monroe had just become a fight for his own survival. Trapped in the suffocating darkness of room 914, with the disembodied voice mocking him from the walls, Jake Riley felt a cold fury eclipse his fear. This was personal now. The killer, this self-styled high priest of the seraphim, hadn't just taken Lily. He had invaded Jake's investigation, analyzed his methods, and was now playing with him, using the hotel as his personal chessboard. He scrambled out into the hallway, the smell of cordite sharp in the stale air. His first thought was Silas Croft, the descendant of Blackwood's head of maintenance. He ran to room 902 and, without knocking, slammed his shoulder against the door. The old frame splintered and gave way. The room was a hoarder's nest, a labyrinth of stacked newspapers, dusty relics, and old hotel furniture. It smelled of mothballs and madness. In the center of the chaos sat a withered old man in a threadbare bathrobe, his eyes wide and terrified. This was Silas Croft. He wasn't a killer. He was a terrified prisoner. "He comes at night," Silas whispered, his voice a dry rustle. "The angel maker. He moves through the walls. He uses the old ways. The passages Blackwood built. The angel maker." The name was chillingly perfect. "He talks about the cleansing," Silas continued, rocking back and forth. "About the city's sickness. The pretty ones who come here with their false hopes. He says he's making them permanent, making them into art, just like Blackwood wanted." Silas claimed the angel maker was a phantom, a spirit. But Jake knew better. This was a man of flesh and blood, a man who knew the hotel's secrets intimately. He had to be a resident, someone who could move about unnoticed. Leaving the terrified old man, Jake went down to the lobby. Hector, the desk clerk, was gone. In his place was a bored-looking night manager who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. Jake strong-armed him into opening the hotel's staff and resident ledger, a massive, dust-covered book that looked as old as the hotel itself. He spent the next few hours poring over the names, looking for anyone who stood out. Most were transients, names without faces. But one name caught his eye. A long-term resident on the 10th floor, listed as a night porter. Though the hotel hadn't officially employed porters in years, his name was Adam. No last name. He had been living at the Seraphim for 5 years, paying his rent in cash. His file was practically empty. He was a ghost in the system. Jake's instincts screamed. The 10th floor was directly above the wing where Lily's room was. He needed to get into the hotel's hidden places, the old ways Silas had mentioned. That meant he needed blueprints. He called Jonesy, his voice urgent. "I need the original architectural plans for the Seraphim Grand. The ones from the 20s. The city archives must have them." While Jonesy worked his magic, Jake returned to the 9th floor. He needed to find the entrance to these secret passages. He started in Lily's room, tapping on the walls, looking for hollow spaces. In the cramped bathroom, behind the peeling plaster where the broken halo was carved, he found it. A section of the tiled wall sounded different. Using his pocket knife, he pried at the grout. A tile came loose, revealing a small, rusted button. He pushed it. A section of the wall in the adjacent wardrobe groaned open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black space. The air that billowed out was cold and foul, thick with the smell of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. This was the hotel's secret circulatory system. His phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Jonesy. A grainy, scanned image of the Seraphim's original blueprints. They were a spiderweb of hidden corridors, dumbwaiters, and service tunnels connecting the entire building. Blackwood hadn't just built a hotel. He had built a predator's den. The blueprints showed a network of passages that allowed one to move between rooms and floors completely unseen. And they all converged on one location. A large, unmarked space in the subbasement. Blackwood's Chamber of Ascension. Armed with the blueprints on his phone and a powerful flashlight, Jake stepped into the passage. The darkness was absolute, the silence broken only by the dripping of water and the frantic beating of his own heart. The walls were narrow and claustrophobic, the air thick with a century of secrets. He could hear the hotel all around him, the groans of the pipes, the faint murmur of a television from a resident's room, the rattling of the ancient elevator. He felt like a virus moving through the building's veins. He followed the blueprints, making his way downward. The passages were a maze, but the map was clear. He was a ghost now, too, hunting the hotel's resident phantom. He passed behind the walls of occupied rooms, hearing snippets of lonely, desperate lives. The Seraphim was a monument to human misery, and the Angel Maker was its self-appointed curator. As he descended into the hotel's bowels, the temperature dropped. The air grew heavier, the smell of decay more potent. He reached the subbasement, a place of groaning boilers and massive, ancient machinery. Following a narrow, brick-lined tunnel, he found a heavy, iron door, not marked on any modern schematic. It was locked, but the lock was old. A few minutes of work with a tension wrench and a pick from the small kit he always carried, and the lock clicked open. He pushed the door open and stepped into the Chamber of Ascension. The room was a scene from a nightmare. It was circular, lined with dark, damp stone. In the center of the room was a large, ornate iron table that looked disturbingly like an altar. Chains with rusted manacles hung from the ceiling above it. The walls were covered with hundreds of faded and peeling photographs. They were pictures of women, all young, all beautiful, all with the same hopeful, starry-eyed look as Lily Monroe. It was a gallery of the hotel's victims, stretching back decades. And in a far corner of the room, Jake saw it. A workshop. Tools were laid out neatly on a table. Knives, pliers, strange surgical-looking implements. And there were chemicals, taxidermy supplies, and a set of large, beautifully crafted wings made from the feathers of crows and ravens. He heard a faint sound from behind a heavy canvas curtain. A soft whimper. Jake pulled the curtain aside. Lily Monroe was there, tied to a chair, her mouth gagged. She was weak and terrified, but she was alive. As Jake rushed to untie her, he knew it was too easy. It was a trap. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind him, the bolt sliding home with a deafening clang. The main lights in the chamber flickered on, revealing every gruesome detail of the room. He was sealed in the killer's sanctuary. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind the altar. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in the simple, dark uniform of a hotel porter. His face was pale and unremarkable, the kind of face you would forget the instant you looked away. It was Adam, the night porter from the 10th floor, the ghost in the system. "Welcome, detective," Adam said, his voice the same distorted, chilling tone Jake had heard through the door. He held a small, electronic voice modulator in one hand. "I knew you would find this place. All great artists need an appreciative audience for their final masterpiece." His eyes were devoid of emotion, flat and dead, but they burned with a fanatical, righteous fire. He wasn't just a killer, he was a true believer. "The Seraphim is a goddess, detective," Adam continued, his voice calm and steady. "She feeds on the broken dreams of this city. I am merely her servant. I help her collect the fallen angels. I give them permanence. I make them beautiful forever." He held up the large, black-feathered wings. "Lily is to be my masterwork, an ascension, a glorious tribute to the city that destroys such beauty." Behind him, another figure shuffled out of the darkness. It was Hector, the terrified desk clerk, his eyes wide with fear. He held a heavy wrench in his trembling hands. "Hector helps me," Adam said with a thin smile. "He knows the hotel's secrets, too. He brings them to me. The lonely ones. The ones no one will miss. Don't you, Hector?" Hector looked at Jake, his face a mask of sweat and terror. He was a pawn, a terrified accomplice trapped in the madman's web. "It's over, Adam," Jake said, his gun trained on the killer. "Let the girl go." Adam just laughed, a dry, hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Over? No, detective. It has just begun. The hotel has been waiting for someone like you. Someone with so much pain, so much potential. You will not be a masterpiece. You will be the new servant." He nodded to Hector, who, with a desperate sob, lunged at Jake with the wrench. The final act in the theater of the damned had begun. The sub-basement chamber became a chaotic stage for a desperate, three-way battle. Hector, sobbing and muttering apologies, swung the heavy wrench with the wild, clumsy terror of a man forced to fight. Jake, his focus split between the immediate threat and the calculating madman by the altar, dodged the blow, the wrench whistling past his ear and clanging against the stone wall. "He made me do it," Hector shrieked, his face a mess of tears and sweat. "He said he'd make me into one of his angels if I didn't help." This was Adam's genius. He didn't just inspire fear, he weaponized it. He had turned the hotel's most cowardly resident into his unwilling bodyguard. Jake didn't want to hurt Hector. He was a victim as much as Lily was. He kicked out, not aiming to maim, but to disarm, sweeping Hector's legs out from under him. The small man went down in a heap, the wrench skittering across the stone floor. But the distraction was all Adam needed. He moved with a speed that was unnerving, darting not toward Jake, but toward a large, rusted lever on the far wall. He pulled it down with a grunt. A deafening groan of ancient machinery filled the chamber, and a section of the floor near Lily's chair began to lower, revealing a dark, water-filled pit below. It was an old cistern, a forgotten part of the hotel's foundation. "The ascension requires a baptism," Adam declared, his eyes blazing with fanatical light. "She will be cleansed in the hotel's oldest waters before she is reborn." He lunged for Lily's chair, intending to push her into the pit. Jake fired his gun, the bullet tearing a chunk of stone from the wall just beside Adam's head. The shot was a warning, but Adam didn't even flinch. He was too lost in his own twisted scripture. Jake charged, tackling Adam and sending them both crashing to the floor, away from Lily and the open pit. The fight was raw and brutal. Adam was wiry but surprisingly strong, fueled by a madman's conviction. He fought like a cornered animal, all sharp elbows and scratching fingernails, a blade appearing in his hand as if from nowhere. Jake, battered and bruised, fought with the grim determination of a man exorcising his own demons. The Starlight slasher case, the girl he couldn't sedate, all fueled the desperate strength in his arms. He would not fail again. He managed to disarm Adam, the blade clattering away into the shadows. As they wrestled on the damp floor, Jake saw the story in Adam's eyes. He wasn't a descendant of Blackwood or a cultist. He was a product of the hotel itself. "They threw me away," Adam gasped, his voice losing its theatrical tone and becoming the whine of a wounded child. "My own mother left me here when I was a boy. The hotel raised me. The walls taught me. I saw them all come and go. The beautiful, hopeful girls. They would look right through me, the invisible boy, the night porter. But I saw them. I saw the city chew them up and spit them out. I'm not a killer. I'm a savior. I give them a purpose they could never find for themselves." He was the ultimate lost soul of the Seraphim, a boy who had grown into a monster in the shadows of its decay, adopting Blackwood's twisted philosophy as his own. With a final, desperate surge, Jake slammed Adam's head against the stone floor. The madman went limp. The fight was over. Panting, his body screaming with pain, Jake pushed himself up. He saw Hector cowering in a corner and Lily, still tied to the chair, tears streaming down her face. He limped over and quickly cut her free. "It's okay," he said, his voice rough. "You're safe now." As he helped her to her feet, he heard a groan from the floor. Adam was stirring. His eyes fluttered open, not with defeat, but with a final, horrific clarity. "The Seraphim is not finished," he whispered. He crawled, his body broken, toward the open cistern. A servant must prepare the way. Before Jake could react, Adam threw himself over the edge, plunging into the black, churning water below. There was a splash, a few frantic bubbles, and then silence. The Angel Maker had been reclaimed by the hotel he served. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, police tape, and solemn faces. Jonesy, looking out of place in his archivist's suit, was there. His expression a mixture of horror and grudging respect. The LAPD swarmed the hotel, uncovering the full, gruesome extent of Adam's decades-long reign. The Chamber of Ascension became the city's most horrific crime scene, and the story of the Seraphim Grand exploded into the headlines. Lily was reunited with her sister, Sarah, a tearful, desperate embrace in the grimy lobby of the hotel that had almost stolen her life. Jake watched them from a distance, feeling the familiar ache of an outsider. He had saved the girl, but he hadn't fixed the city. The Seraphim Grand was eventually condemned. Its doors chained shut, its windows boarded up, but it still stood, a dark, silent monument on the corner of a forgotten street. Its secrets finally exposed, but its malevolence still a palpable presence. A few weeks later, Jake was back in his office. The dust was still there, the fan still sliced through the apathy, but something had shifted. He was looking at a new file on his desk, a runaway teen from a small town in Arizona, last seen at a bus station in Hollywood. Another dreamer drawn to the city's flame. He picked up the phone. His past was still a part of him, a ghost that would always walk at his side. But in the dark, forgotten corners of the City of Angels, in its hotel rooms and alleyways, there were people who needed someone to fight the monsters that thrived in the shadows. He had faced the abyss in the Seraphim Grand and had walked out. The guilt hadn't vanished, but it now had a purpose. The work was never done. With a weary sigh, he got up, put on his coat, and walked out into the hazy afternoon sun. Another lost soul to find, another story to finish.